But here we are on this auspicious cold day, as it were. We're here on the Deadzone, the podcast, and it is myself, Bryan. I'm joined with Scott and a special guest here today, Christopher Verspeak.
Hello.
So,
what's going on?
Yeah.
Welcome to the Deadzone podcast. Deadzone is the sci-fi tabletop.
So special episode today. In addition to our regular recordings, Christopher has graciously reached out to us to see about doing an interview in preparation for an upcoming release of or a re-release, an update, if you will, to the novel First Strike, which was one of the first novels set in the Warpath universe. And we're excited to have you, Christopher. Thank you so much for hopping on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So, would you mind, for folks that maybe aren't familiar with your body of work, do you want to just kind of take a moment to introduce yourself and how you kind of started working at Mantic or writing for Mantic, I should say?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. So I have been writing for Mantic. I can't remember if I started in 2015 or 2016, but around about that time. The first thing I ever wrote for Mantic was a short story for a compilation, fiction compilation that came out with the first Deadzone Kickstarter. I wrote a short story about Wrath, basically being kind of psychotic. Yeah, and that.
I think I know that one.
Yeah. And that got me. That meant that Mantic then knew my name, and so when the Warpath Kickstarter came around, they asked me to write quite a bit of stuff for that. So I've been writing for Mantic since then. Since then, I've written Firefight, Star Saga. I wrote, and a whole bunch of other stuff, and of course the first Warpath novel, First Strike.
Excellent. All big lore heavy elements of the setting so far, especially things like Star Saga is huge. Those compilation novels, anthologies that had originally come out are also really fun to read, and definitely recommend people go back and track those down. I think they can get them digitally off of the main site right now, but yeah, no, it's great to really kind of speak to one of the main kind of drafters, if you will, of the setting here. So with that, we're obviously here to talk about First Strike. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what this new project is? Like, why do we go back and we're re-releasing this novel?
First Strike. So obviously, First Strike was it was a novel that we did as part of the Warpath Kickstarter when Warpath was first released, however many years ago that was. And it tells a story of an enforcer agent who travels to a planet where there's a war going on between some corporate marines and a vermin infestation. And all is not as it seems, and hijinks ensue. So we wrote the novel and we put that out, and it went out as part of the Kickstarter, as I say. Since then, Mantic handed over the novels to Wing-Tassar Publishing, who've done all the Kings of War novels since then. And Wing-Tassar wanted to re-release First Strike. They wanted to polish it up and put it out again as the start of a series of novels. And so everything was agreed. We were going to go ahead and do all of that. And then COVID kind of hit. and everybody's plans went out the window, and we didn't really touch it for a couple of years. But with Epic being released, Winged Hussar thought now would be a good time to get First Strike going again. So that's what we did. But we didn't want to just put out the same old book that came out with the Kickstarter. So what we've done is a new edition. It's been totally re-edited and largely rewritten. So I spent a lot of last year rewriting it and rereading it and going over it again and fixing bits and having bits pointed out to me that could have been better the first time around. And also writing a new, it's not really a short story. It felt like a short story to me. When I looked at it, it was nearly half as long as First Strike again. And so that's an extra story called Crash Protocol, which is, it's kind of about some of the characters in First Strike. It's kind of a prequel, and it expands on the background of the Warpath universe and has people doing things you might not be expecting. And that's all going together. I'll give you, here's a world exclusive. I think we're going to call it, it's going to be called First Strike, the Alpha Strike edition. And it should be available, it should be ready in time for Adepticon the end of March this year. Yeah, so First Strike, the Alpha Strike edition, next month.
Excellent. I'll make sure that I get this episode out before that.
So the Alpha Strike is the new version of the book. Is that what I'm?
The Alpha Strike edition. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
When we were writing it, Stuart said, "So what do you want to call it?" So Stuart Gibbs, who was the head of the studio at the time, said, "So what's it called?" And I came up with two names: First Strike and Alpha Strike. And for a long time, it was like a toss-up, like, what do we call it, First Strike or Alpha Strike? And in the end, I went with First Strike because I figured, okay, fine, it's my first novel, so I'm going to call it First Strike. So that's what we went with. So possible alternative titles for the new edition. It could have been called First Strike Strikes Back, but I thought First Strike Alpha Strike edition it's a little bit punchy, a little bit better.
It fits the Enforcer theme a bit too, like with Alpha Strike. I just feel like that plays into the lore a little bit.
Yeah. So we've got the layouts are all done, and we're just working on the cover, and it should be ready for Adepticon. That's
awesome. And I, kind of speaking to the Enforcers. So obviously, one of the main characters in the book is let me see if I got his full rank, Lieutenant Commander Roka. And it is like one of the things that I absolutely love of stories like this is Roka has an actual mini that you can use in the game, right? And so that's something that I think is just an exceptionally cool thing. And did the Roka model exist before the novel, or was that a kind of joint production, if you will?
No, it was he was written for the novel, and then the figure came out after that. I think there were forward observers. I think forward observers had been seen in Warpath before that, and so I went with I decided to make is he the protagonist? One of the protagonists of the book, a forward observer. I pronounce it Roka.
That's
maybe
I will stand corrected as the author should be the one dictating the pronunciation.
Yeah, it's your choice.
Yeah,
Raka.
Yeah, right. I'm fine with it. Maybe it's an American thing. Maybe Americans look at it and it's obviously Roka. But I call him Roka. He's named after Zach De La Rocca from Rage Against the Machine. And I was looking around for what to call him. He was going to be code named Rocker, and then that just seemed a little bit too on the nose. So I thought I've got to have that name in there somehow. So that's why he's whatever rank he is, Rocker.
That's
Absolutely.
Legit.
That's awesome. So with one of the things that I've absolutely loved about the Warpath setting ever since I got into the game several years back is, and especially the lore side of it, is that it's a universe that is just so rich for storytelling. Like not only the factions, but also just the different spaces that exist with the different spheres. You can have things where it's like it's a cyberpunk adventure. You can have have it happening on a big war-torn planet that's already been devastated by conflict. You can have the frontier space where it's just brand new and untouched. What's been kind of your favorite aspect of writing in this setting?
It's funny you were listing all those different settings for the Warpath universe, and I was thinking, I kind of never get to write half of those. I would tend to always write like really dirty, grimy, grubby kind of places. Like everywhere I write is kind of out on the fringe. It's in the less developed sectors. Crash Protocol is in a really grimy, dirty part of the universe. I think we've kind of really only we've really, it's a cliche, we've only scratched the surface of everything that could be in Warpath. I keep finding myself thinking, I want to write some glossy sci-fi. I want to write the core. I want to see, people moving around in this beautiful, shiny, glossy, exciting, sort of the cyberpunk kind of thing. But then I found myself writing, and it's somewhere really dirty, really broken, and really miserable. So I keep getting kind of pulled back out there. So that's me. I apparently specialize in the broken parts of the universe,
which some might even say is a lot of it, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's a war game, right? And war is pretty dirty, so
yeah. I have plans. I mean, I wrote. So last year, last year we started writing for Epic Warpath, and I misunderstood the brief. So Matt Gilbert gave me a brief, and he mentioned writing a campaign and epic warfare and all these kind of things, and I understood it to mean that he was looking for a story that would kind of justify epic warfare. So he wanted a story for a campaign. So I wrote this thing happening, which does happen in a slightly more glossy part of the universe. Maybe not the shiniest core part of the core, but it was definitely a much more shiny part of the universe. And something horrendous happens, which justifies everybody getting out the big toys. Everybody really wants to murder everybody now. And I shared it with Matt, and he listened very patiently, and he said, okay, that's great, but the campaign has actually already been decided. It's actually happening this year. So we can't actually, I don't think we can actually use that. So, okay, so I misunderstood. So then he said, try and write it up. Why don't you try and write that and put it in the Epic Warpath book? And I did. I tried, but it was too big. And I just felt like the ideas I had, the things I wanted to happen, just didn't fit inside a rule book, inside the background section of a rule book. So I said, this should be another novel. And Matt said, yeah, pitch it to Winged Hussar, and if they agree, then that can go ahead. So that could happen. So that is something colossal happening in a shinier part of the universe and triggering some fairly major events happening. But we'll have to wait and see if I actually get to go and do that.
I'm excited for that. Let's Mantic. We know you listen to the podcast.
think what is the most cataclysmic thing that could happen in the GCPS? It's something like it's along those lines. What's the worst thing that could happen in the GCPS?
Some pretty heavy stuff.
Well,
that's what I want to write.
Yeah, you're listening to a Reb player, and I would just say that things continue as usual. That is the most cataclysmic thing. So,
things are not going to carry on the same for the Rebs. I can tell you that.
Well, no, that's incredibly exciting. And Mantic, we know you like to listen. We want to hear that. We want to see that happen. So let's grease whatever palms we need, shake hands, and let's get it done. So that's so cool. Yeah. We have an in. Rick, you're listening to the podcast right now.
Let's go.
Yeah. Very, very cool. So what other did you, and I apologize in advance, did you work on like the big source book that came out with the Warpath project as well? And was that a collaborative with other authors, or was there sections that you were kind of dedicated to?
Yeah, I wrote. I'm just looking for my copy of it. It's on here on the shelves here somewhere. Yeah, I wrote everything. I was thinking about this the other day because I thought you might ask something like this. I wrote everything. I didn't write the Marauders bit, and I didn't write the Enforcers section. I can't remember if I wrote the GCPS, the corporation, the sort of the corporate military section, but everything else I wrote. So I did the Veermin and the Forge Fathers and Alien Races and the timeline and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, that was me.
Awesome.
Don't ask me some like really hard trivia question now.
Well, it's cool if you could write a volume of work where you don't remember like what parts or your ideas initially,
And I gotta say, show my appreciation for that, because that source book has been such a valuable tool. There's a number of us. There's like a Mantic fan fiction Facebook group called Ronnie the Bards of Mantica, and there's a lot of folks in there, and we're constantly writing like short stories and our own little takes on the setting, and that source book has been just so instrumental in lining up events and characters and technology, making sure that we're talking about vehicles and everything correctly. I know I was combing through that. I couldn't tell you how many hours getting all of the details about the different vehicles that GCPS use and the Enforcers use, and breaking all that stuff down. It's a really, really great book. If folks haven't checked it out yet, I think that's another one that Mantic has available on their website in an ebook form. Definitely check it out. It's a great supplement to the setting, and it's continuing to evolve, that's for sure. Now, you mentioned that the core rule books, a lot of them have been continuing to build that story out, where like Deadzone 3rd edition, the command protocols, firefight, like there is a lot more background that gets written in each of those new editions of those books. And I think some older players maybe gloss over that section because we feel like we've already read it from maybe in second edition or something like that, and so just making the point of saying go read up on those other sections in the lore and the background of the book, because there's new stuff. If you've only come in in first edition, there's been a lot written since then. But
I'm always trying to add new stuff. I mean, the thing with the background lore is it's never intended to be static. So we're always trying to move the races around and change things and make things different. So like I said, if I get to write the book I want to write, everything will change. Well, not everything, but most things, a lot of things will change. I mean, they'll still all be fighting each other, but a lot of things in the universe will change. But yeah, every expansion pack I do, I'm trying to move the races along and trying to develop the universe. I mean, that's what it's felt like. I mean, doing the source book that you mentioned was just such a privilege to do all that. I mean, I remember writing to Stuart and saying, I mean, this is just this is a dream, to take a universe that was very, very bare bones and start to flesh it out and start to turn it into something that's alive and where things are happening.
Yeah, absolutely. The on that same note, one of the questions I always have to ask any guest that comes on our show is, what is your favorite faction? And since we were talking about like the different species and stuff, do you, as a sub question of that, do you have a specific species that you like, maybe beyond your favorite faction?
No, I don't really have. I can't say that, because then everybody will say, "Oh, that's why he always writes about this race or the other." No,
it's okay to default to the Rebs. You know, it covers everybody.
Yeah, but the Rebs are a bunch of races, right?
Yeah. Big things happening for the Rebs. That's you know, I'll tease that much. I have a soft spot for all of them. I mean, I've written every race, and so I have a soft spot for all of them. I'd like. There isn't a race that I don't want to write. Actually, the one I find hardest to write is Orcs. Actually, I find Orcs actually quite hard to write. Somebody we were talking about earlier on about stumping with a really difficult question. Somebody asked me what accent do Orcs have in the Warpath universe? I thought, oh man, that's a really hard one. Like, to me, they just sound British, but they probably don't to everybody else. I feel like we haven't really developed the Orcs Marauders. Well, we've developed their story. The Battles for the Cabot Worlds, that's really about Orcs and developing them. I kind of have a soft spot for the Orcs. I wrote the Battle for the Cabot Worlds. I wanted the Orcs to kind of have their own homeland, because it felt bad that they'd been persecuted, you know, that since Mandrake, you know, that they've just been sort of hounded and persecuted and put down upon. So I wanted them to have hope and, you know, and a dream of a future and be a race that wants to achieve something. And so that's what the Cabot Worlds are all about. That said, obviously the GCPS really, really doesn't want the Orcs to have a new homeland, and especially not several worlds. And there were other races. So the Epic Warpath book, I touch upon this in the Epic Warpath book. There are other races that really don't want the Orcs to have the worlds that they've claimed for themselves. So the Orcs aren't going to have it all their own way forever. I really like the Asterians. I really like the Forge Fathers. I had fun having a Forge Father in Star Saga. Actually, I planned a whole expansion pack with the Forge Fathers, where the Forge Father character, I think it's alluded to. I can't remember how clear I made it in the book that he is essentially royalty. You know, he's like high up, or he was quite high up in the Forge Father clans. And there was going to be an expansion pack where you were going to go to a Forge Father clan, and the missions would involve you basically uncovering what he'd done, you know, why he's not a Forge Father anymore, and maybe trying to help him reclaim his ancestry. We didn't get to do that. I had one for Asterians as well. I planned these expansion packs, and Mantis said, "Yeah, great, that's lovely," and then they didn't do them. and I think the reason was because they didn't want to have to make a whole new set of terrain just for Forge Fathers, a whole new set of terrain just for Asterians. So it didn't really kind of work out that way, but. Yeah, I have a soft spot for most of the races in the galaxy.
Oh man, now you're really wanting me to see that Star Saga release too. That would be so amazing.
Another novel, you know. Star Saga, the novel, the quest for Ogden's honor.
I was just about to ask, do you think a novelization of Star Saga might be in the future? And it's okay if I need to edit this bit out if I'm delving into territory that you cannot confirm nor deny.
Nothing planned. There's certainly nothing planned. That said, it all depends on the community, doesn't it? I mean, if the Alpha Strike edition, if people like the Alpha Strike edition, and you know, and enough people buy it, then Winged Hussar will then ask me to do the sequel, which I have started writing. I have started writing the sequel to First Strike. But that will only see the light of day if people like the Alpha Strike edition. My apocalyptic novel, I really want to do that. I'd love to do more with the Star Saga characters. One or two Star Saga characters might have a small part to play in the second Rocker novel. I'm not saying I've written a scene that involves a character from Star Saga, but I might have. Yeah, I'd love to write all of these guys. Can I tell you who my favorite Forge Father is? I got to tell you this. You're asking who's my favorite. So who's your favorite
Forge Father character?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked. My favorite Forge Father character, and I can't believe I don't have him on my desktop here in front of me. I can't remember where I put him. Is the dragon, Ingolf Christensen. That guy is a lot of fun to write. He's the meanest, most cantankerous. He absolutely hates humans. He'll fight anybody else. He's an equal opportunities fight partner. He'll take on anybody. He hates everybody. So he's one bitter dwarf. He may have a part to play in apocalyptic events coming to the tabletop soon. I love writing him, and he's based on my father-in-law.
Is that a good endorsement?
So my father-in-law is the nicest guy you could ever meet.
Aww.
Right? He's my wife is Danish, and my father-in-law is like, my wife calls him like a little gnome. He's like just this completely happy-go-lucky, little Danish geezer, who, like, at 70 years old, he's climbing on the roof of his house, fixing, new roofing panels, and he's going, oh yeah, the wind was blowing me, but I got to do this. This is at 70. Absolutely the sweetest guy. Love that guy. So I wanted to write a Forge Father, who's the polar opposite of my father-in-law. So yeah, Ingolf Christensen is the meanest dwarf in the galaxy, and he's based on my father-in-law, who's one of the nicest guys I've ever met.
I love it. You just took opposites. You just made a Venn diagram. And just opposites.
Yeah. And Ingolf has a dog. Ingolf's dog, Pal, the Cyber Mastiff, because Ingolf used to have a dog that was named something similar many, many years ago. My wife remembers fondly. So yeah, so Ingolf and his dog, the polar opposite of my father-in-law and his dog.
That's fantastic. Do you paint the minis as well? See, like this is what happens is I think of other good questions. After we've officially stopped recording, which is why I haven't hit the button yet.
Yeah, I do. I used to paint an awful lot. I kind of ended up sort of getting dumped out of the hobby a little bit whenever I started writing for Mantic, because it just took up so much time.
Mm-hmm.
And I play a few games from, there's another company that I play a few games from every now and then. I'm trying to get my little boy into Kill Team at the moment, so we've just agreed we're going to do like a campaign of Kill Team. But yeah, my eyes aren't really any good for painting anymore. I kind of picked up a paintbrush and I was like, man, like I really suck at painting now. Apparently I can't do this anymore. So yeah, we're going to play Kill Team with lots of grey miniatures, I think.
There you go.
So I have a question then that kind of has to go with that. So if you were, because I read the foreword of the book, like games are what led you into becoming a novelist. And so, like, the love of playing these games got you in the Mantic, and like kind of stepping stones from there. Would you
Is that in First Strike? That's in this book?
Yeah.
We got an advanced copy from Brandon of the
oh right, okay, yeah. All right, you've read that then. Yeah. Oh, the Alpha Strike edition. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But and I haven't read the novel yet, but I'm really excited now knowing especially like who you are and like what's going into the book. That totally adds to it. Would you say that your love of games or your love of like being a novelist now is the focus? Because they're obviously connected.
I don't think I'd ever say I love being a novelist. I just love expanding the universe. It's such a I mean, it's a privilege and it's an incredible thing to be able to do. I just want the universe to be full. Yeah. I just want to see all these different parts of the universe. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
It's like we've seen like this tiny little bit of the Warpath Universe. I wish there was more. I want there to be more and more and more and more. Yeah, so I'm much more about the gaming and the storytelling. I want to see the stories grow. Yeah, does that answer the question? Yeah, yeah. I just want to tell the stories. I want to see the universe get bigger and have more things happening in it. Yeah, I just love seeing things happen.
Artists like you to do that, you know. So I think it's awesome.
Thank you. Somebody called me an artist.
Hey, that's what writing is. It's an art form.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it really is.
It takes a lot of discipline to, write, 300 pages of a consistent thing, like most people aren't able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I got into Mantic because it was, so when Kickstarter was brand new, right? It was this sort of new idea that you could kickstart a company, right? So a company could do things that they could never do before without, being in hocked banks for huge amounts of money.
Right.
And Mantic were, had just sort of started, and were doing Kings of War. They were giving away zombies in different magazines and things, and trying to get themselves known. And then Kickstarter came along, and they were doing the Kings of War Kickstarter. I backed it because I loved what the company was doing. I've literally never played a game of Kings of War, right? I've still got my box of Kickstarter Kings of War stuff, my Basileans, I've got some Basilean chariots and elves and all that sort of stuff that I'm never going to play with. But I just really wanted to back the company. I wanted to see the company become something, right? A new tabletop gaming company that's trying to give people huge armies without reaching into their wallets at the same time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I thought, I want to see that succeed. So I backed that first Kickstarter for that reason. And then when they started doing sci-fi, it was kind of like what happened like years ago. So when I was a little kid, Games Workshop, we just did Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And fantasy doesn't really do it for me that much. Not as much as sci-fi does. And my friends played Warhammer. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll paint a couple of knights and things like this. But my heart wasn't really in it. So when GW said, we're going to do Space Marines, right? We're going to do a game set in space. It was like, wow, fantastic. It's Christmas. This is fantastic. And so it was kind of like that when Mantic said, we're going to start doing a sci-fi game. We're going to, they had Operation Pandora, and then, now we're going to do more games. And it was like, oh, fantastic. So I jumped at the chance to be part of it. So that's why I jumped on doing the story about Wrath. They wanted a sample, like a sample of your writing and the idea for your story. And I didn't really know what to do because nobody had ever done a Warpath story before. So I just picked Wrath, I read his background, and I did a sample for Mantic, and it was 200 words of the most over-the-top gonzo violence I could think of that a small child could still read. Wrath just eviscerates some enforcers, and he's basically playing table tennis with their heads, and there's bits flying everywhere. And I recorded. And I did a video of my story because I was on holiday, and so I didn't have anything to write on. So I just had my wife record me saying, "This is what's going to happen. Wrath is going to do this, and this head's going to go off. There's blood everywhere." And Mantic were like, "Yeah, great, go ahead, write that." So that was my in to Mantic. And since then it's just been the opportunity to flesh out the universe and to constantly be adding new stuff. And the source book, there's almost nothing written, so I have to make all this stuff up and decide, so how does this work and how does that happen and how do they do this and why is this the situation? And that's what it feels like. It just feels like there's lots and lots and lots and lots of situations that we haven't explained why and how and where. And that's what I really want to do, is just make sense of it all and see the things happening, and show people things you've never seen before. And of course, lots of enforcers getting their heads chopped off and all that as well.
You gotta have that.
Man after my own heart.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again so much, Chris. And I think post-editing Bryan is going to switch some of these sections around because that was a really good chunk, and I don't want that past.
Now I'm warmed up.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah,
I'm warmed up, and
it's
it's not an interview, so I'll just go. Just like say a faction, and I'll just go for half an hour. Just tell you like half an hour behind the scenes about whatever.
Okay, so I wanted to ask this, and again, it's kind of a silly thing, but maybe it fits in Warpath. Is so like the orcs aren't like just like, I mean, they are like a warlike species, but they're they're a little more sophisticated than other worlds, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
How do you feel about writing about an orc diplomat that's trying to establish their hegemony in the Warpath universe?
They are smart. I mean, Warpath orcs, and that's something else I loved when the first Marauder sculpts came out. That they were sort of like kind of they're kind of brutish, right? They're thuggish, but they're also clearly disciplined and organized, right? They had like these sort of Africa Corps uniforms on, and and they have a commander with a proper hat and a proper big overcoat and everything. So they're not just like rampaging monsters that just want to destroy everything. And that's how I can write something like the Cabot worlds, where they can decide we want to take these worlds and they're going to be ours. You can have a legendary orc leading them. An orc diplomat, though,
it's dicey.
Yeah, I'd be more of a goblin diplomat.
Yeah, they don't have to be good at diplomacy. That's just their attempt at diplomacy.
Yeah, I think they're all diplomats, aren't they? They've all got a gun, and that's all you need to know. They're going to tell you what they want, and you're going to get out of the way. Otherwise, they're just going to take it. That's orc diplomacy. I think the orcs, the lesson that the orcs have been taught, like the whole of the Deadzone universe, the Warpath universe, it's all a very cold place, right? Everybody is in it for themselves. Like every civilization is just in it to get as much of themselves as they possibly can. I think I said it in the source book. It's a universe of infinite resources, but there's still not enough for everybody. Everybody just wants more, and the orcs have just been taught the lesson harder than most races, that you're on your own, right? You're on your own in the Warpath universe. So yeah, I mean, there's probably diplomacy between the clans. I mean, to bring all the armies together to defend, the Cerberus Moor and all the Cabot worlds and everything. You've got to have some know-it-all, but some knowledge rather. I think orc diplomacy is of the five-fingered kind, right? Like it's like it's knuckle diplomacy more than anything else.
I love it. I love it.
So with the last summer campaign, a big element of it was the Night Stalkers, kind of bridging universes, if you will, and kind of in essence kind of invading parts of the Warpath universe. Are you familiar with them as a faction and kind of what their whole deal is, and are you excited to have them as an option to write for?
So this is where I accidentally clicked my button. I drop out of the interview. Yeah, I didn't write the Night Stalkers. I think Rob Berman wrote Night Stalkers. So I haven't really touched on them. So they're sort of spreading through fear. Night Stalkers I don't really know that much about, and I haven't really considered writing them as yet, but that could change.
That's all good. There's so many options, right? That you don't need to you don't need to be the expert of all of them or anything. So, but no, that's really cool. It's again just another way of psychological sci-fi horror kind of creeping into the setting as well, on top of the plague and whatever other kind of nightmares exist out there. So, all right. Any other Scott? Do you have any questions, or Chris? Do you have any questions for us? The reverse interview kicks in.
What do people want to see in Warpath fiction?
The Rebs. I'm a biased party, but yeah, I think really just more, and I think you did one really great thing with First Strike is having one of those factions that's very unique to Mantic setting, with the Veermen being a major player in the setting, and doing things like the Forge Fathers. You know, there's and even like their take on the Orcs with the Marauders, really kind of, I think, leaning into those really unique elements of the Warpath setting as far as species go. I think is a really cool element of the universe that can really help set it apart, and maybe just get, you know, kind of general sci-fi fans into the setting, maybe even before they play the game. So I think that's a great space for us to continue to evolve and explore.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good factions that the Forge Fathers is a really nice, it's a unique take on dwarves. I think dwarves in space, the Asterians, are as enigmatic as they are mysterious. I think I mentioned because you've read the preface, I had to be down from putting every single faction in First Strike, because it was literally pitched to me as this is going to be the first Warpath Universe novel. So of course, me as a fan, I'm thinking, okay, well, everybody's going to want to see their favorite faction in this book. Right. So I planned out this story where basically Rocker meets just about every faction. And unsurprisingly enough, it was a little bit overwhelming. And I had to talk to Mantic and say, look, this is like getting a bit crazy. And they were very kind. Stuart Gibbs was very kind to put me in touch with Guy Haley, for a little Skype chat. And, Guy listened very patiently to my story of all these different adventures that Rocker was going to go on. And at the end of it, he said, yeah, that sounds really, really good, but it's probably a little bit too much for one book. So his advice was, scale it down, just pick two factions and just have it be about those two factions, which is why First Strike is about Veermen and GCPS. But yeah, there's plenty of ideas. Like I said, there's plenty of ideas for other factions and them getting involved in the Warpath fictional universe.
I think that is a perfect answer.
Yeah.
So, all right. So now I think I will formally wrap us up, and just artificially move the section where we did that earlier to this part of the show, because fixing it in post is one of the joys of my job here.
Well, it's because as soon as you say the interview's kind of done, then it's like you can breathe again.
Yeah,
and then all these ideas come out.
I've asked all my questions that I had written down. Oh yeah, wait, what about all this stuff that organically came up? No, that's how it works sometimes. So, but Chris, thank you so much again for hopping on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Chat with you. Yeah, and so just wanted to kind of recap the kind of release dates for everything. So we're looking at the First Strike Alpha Strike Edition is going to be hopefully out by Adepticon. So make sure folks that are going to Adepticon stop by there. Wind Hussar has got always a fantastic collection of Mantic novels, especially if you're in the Kings of War side of things. They got some great stuff. I believe they'll trying to remember if the next Dreadball novel will also be available at that time. And so definitely stop by their booth. They have they're great guys, and they're so much fun to hang out with. Check out their piece. Do you have an update on we kind of alluded to the other kind of Warpath novel that was I think like a bit of another kind of anthology series. Is there any word on when that might be coming out?
Do you mean the Epic Warpath compilation?
Yeah, for the Epic release.
As far as I know, it's to come out with the Kickstarter, the Kickstarter game. So was that May? There was an update came out a little while ago, wasn't it? They were talking about May, I think, for the Epic Warpath.
I thought it was April, to be honest. That's like in my
brain.
Okay.
It soon is one part what I had in my head.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so I've got a story in that. I did a story for that, which is about a corporate marine force who have been fighting the Forge Fathers for quite some time on the planet Frovox, and yeah, some questions. I think the book's called The Asterian Enigma. So I'm just thinking very carefully. I don't want to give any spoilers to any of the stories. Let's say there's some enigmatic things happen, and some interesting questions have to be asked. Yeah, and then we've got another story. So I've read all the stories that are in the book. Yeah, as far as I know, everything's been finalized. But yeah, I'll look out for it with the Kickstarter when it comes out.
My first novel and steps into the official Mantic is going to be in that as well. I had the one called The Mesa with the Enforcers.
Of course you did.
And the Asterian. So I'm excited to be part of that collection. And
yeah.
Like I said, I love writing in this setting, and I appreciate. I know you had given me some feedback too, and I really appreciate the lining up of both lore things and correcting some rookie mistakes that I had. So definitely appreciate the feedback there. So excited for that one to be coming out as well. And as kind of a last bit, do you have any other projects or work, or where folks might be able to find stuff that you've done?
No, I only write for Mantic. They're the only people I've ever written for. Currently, the only people I'm really interested in writing for.
I appreciate that sentiment.
Sorry, there's nothing more I can add.
It's all good. They're a great set of guys. I really love like what the company is, the kind of games that they create, the worlds that they establish, and I don't even think I speak for everybody when I say we're all very excited to get more stories set in the Warpath Universe setting.
Totally.
Every Kings of War novel we see, we're like, where's the sci-fi one? When's that coming out? So
yeah.
So I guess the last call to action would be make sure you go out and buy the Alpha Strike edition of First Strike as soon as you can on every format that you possibly can. And support the release, and that's a great way to signal to Mantic that hey, we not only want more, we need more.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
Ending on a very strong note.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chris, thank you so much again for joining us on the show. It's been a real pleasure talking with you about the setting and the novel and everything like that. You're a great inspiration for those of us that love this setting, and we can't wait to hear more about it.
Hey, thanks very much for having me, guys, and thanks for everything you guys are doing with the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's nice meeting you.
All right. So with that, see everybody later. We don't have a good outro for the show yet, apart from like, share, and
subscribe. There's usually another 10 minutes after the show that gets into the show.
Right.
Usually, yeah.